Dev Jaya Narsimha Dev, Narsimha Dev Jaya Narsimha Dev. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada.
Jayam Vishnupad Paramamsa Paribrājakacārya Astatara Sata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nityalila Praviswaram Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Premse Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mathura Dham Ki Jai. Shri Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Didevi Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaura Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so okay, that's good. Okay, so we're on Canto 1, Chapter 15. The Pandavas retire timely. And it's text 41, is it, on the board there? Vācaṁ, juhāva, manasi, tat, prāṇa, itare, cha, tam, mṛtyāv, apānam, sotsargaṁ, tam, pañcatve, ajohavīt, vācaṁ, juhāva, manasi, tat prāṇa itare chatam, mṛtyāv apānam, sotsargaṁ, tam pañcatve ajohavīt. Vācaṁ juhāva manasi, tat prāṇa itare chatam, mṛtyāv apānam, sotsargaṁ, tam pañcatve ajohavīt. Vācaṁ juhāva manasi, vācaṁ, speeches, juhāva, relinquished, manasi, into the mind, prāṇe, mind into breathing, itare, other senses also, tam, into that, mṛtyau, into death, apānam, breathing, sa-utsargam, sa-utsargam, with all dedication, tam, that, pañcatve, into the body made of 5 elements, he, certainly, ajohavīt, amalgamated it. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Then he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind, then the mind into life, life into breathing, its total existence into the embodiment of the 5 elements, and his body into death. Then, as a pure self, he became free from the material conception of life. Please repeat. Then he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind, then the mind into life, life into breathing, his total existence into the embodiment of the 5 elements, and his body into death. Then as a pure self, he became freed from the material conception of life. Purport. Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira, like his brother Arjuna, began to concentrate and gradually became freed from all material bondage. First, he concentrated all the actions of the senses and amalgamated them into the mind. Or in other words, he turned his mind towards the transcendental service of the Lord. He prayed that since all material activities are performed by the mind in terms of actions and reactions of the material senses, and since he was going back to Godhead, the mind would wind up its material activities and be turned towards the transcendental service of the Lord. There was no longer a need for material activities. Actually, the activities of the mind cannot be stopped, for they are the reflection of the eternal soul. But the quality of the activities can be changed from matter to the transcendental service of the Lord. The material color of the mind is changed when one washes it from contaminations of life-breathing and thereby frees it from the contamination of repeated births and deaths, and situates it in pure spiritual life. All is manifested by the temporary embodiment of the material body, which is a production of the mind at the time of death, and if the mind is purified of practice by transcendental loving service to the Lord, and is constantly engaged in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord, there is no more chance of the mind's producing another material body after death. It will be freed from absorptions in material contamination. The pure soul will be able to return home back to Godhead. Then he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind into life, life into breathing, his total existence into the embodiment of the 5 elements, and his body into death. Then as pure self, he became freed from material conception of life. Hare Krishna. So, quite a technical explanation about leaving the body. But when your time's up, you got to go. Whether you go voluntarily or whether you get kicked out. But somewhere or another, you cannot stay in this body forever. The body is not the self. The self rather resides as in a hierarchy above the other elements. Indriyani prāṇe aho, indriyabhya paramanaha, manasastu parabuddhi, yo buddhe paratastu saha. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it's mentioned there that there's this hierarchy, indriyani prāṇe aho. Above the indriyas, the senses, below the senses, there is the material elements, which without the entrance of the active mind, they're inert. When the senses are employed in activity, then from that activity that leads to the mind. So the mind is like a pivotal point. Above the mind, then there's the intelligence, and above the intelligence there's the soul. So if one knows how this hierarchy is working, then you can execute this method that Yudhiṣṭhira Maharaj is being described here. Yeah, that one has to retreat. Prabhupada says it's like a telescope. Yeah, one into another, everything folding back, folding back, folding back, until you're ultimately left with just one's consciousness, which should be fixed on Krishna. If the consciousness is not fixed on Krishna, then in the next stage, you leave this body, then you have to take another material body. The mind drags one from one body to another, as it's mentioned in the purport here by Srila Prabhupada. The movement of the soul is either dictated by the lower elements, especially the mind, which is pivotal, or by the superior arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you don't fix your mind on something, then you have a very precarious situation. Where will you go? What will you do? What kind of body shall we have to occupy after this one is finished? So the main part of human life is that the mind has to control the senses, and then it has to meditate, be used to meditate on the higher intelligence, and then the soul itself proper. If we can do that, then at the time of leaving this body, there'll be no lamentation. There'll just be jubilation, actually. So in the 1960s, there was one doctor, Kubler-Ross. So she did some studies on what happens to a person at the time of death, or what happens to a person when they're about to die. Yeah, they've been informed that they're now terminally ill. So when you're terminal, nobody can do anything for you. So nobody had really done any studies onto what the situation of the person is when he's informed that he is terminally ill, that nothing can save you, that's it, you're out. Yeah, just like sometimes we say, I got a photo yesterday my sister sent of my mother. She's 99 years old, so just passed. So what is she doing? Eating ice cream. No chanting, no fixation of the mind on the Supreme Lord, no thought about where we're going next. No, give me an ice cream. So ice cream might be temporarily nice, but it's not going to take you to a higher form of life, that's for sure. So we have to be very careful what we do with this life, what we divert our attention to. So this doctor, she did some studies. She came up with an acronym, DABDA. DABDA means that there's I can't hear you. No, that's not what I was looking for. Anyway, basically, they traced out the development of consciousness for a person who's leading towards death. So denial is the first one. Yeah, when you're told you're going to die very shortly, nobody can help you. No, how could that be? That can't happen to me. That happens to somebody else. So there's a tendency towards denial. Then after denial, when you are still under the threat, then after denial, one comes to anger. You get angry. Why me? You know, it should happen to somebody else. What have I done to deserve this? So like that, one becomes very angry and upset. And then after the anger, then D-A-B, balance, bargaining. Well, okay, at least if I've got to die, just give me a few more years. Yeah, Prabhupada had such a friend in Allahabad. He used to mention sometimes that at the time of his death, he was pleading with the doctors, just give me 4 more years. I have all my stuff, it's all set up. I just need 4 years to settle all my affairs, and then I'll agree to your entrance of death. But no, Prabhupada says, such a foolish person, materialist, you don't get a choice. When death comes, you're away, you're gone. So there's no question of, give me 2 years or 4 years or 100 years. They're all foolishness. The duration of life of this body is already determined by the number of breaths. When you get to your last breath, you're out, finished. And where you'll go next, nobody knows. So dabda. That balancing is there. And then D for depression. When you can't bargain anymore, the doctor's told you, sorry, I can't. It's not within my power to keep you in this body. So then you become very depressed. And then after depression, finally, if you're lucky, you come to the last stage, acceptance. All right, nothing can be done. So they retreat and accept, now I'm going to die. So that's for an ordinary man. Of course, the different stages that they described, they were explaining that can come in one line, one progression, or you flip back and forth between anger, fear, these different other elements, and the mind is always jumping from here to there. Or even if you come to the point where you've accepted that you're going to die, so you're at peace with that, then the relatives come and they say, no, don't die. Stay with us. Yeah, we want your money, we want your household, we want all your so this is going on. Ordinary people, they're always in this precarious position, and it's always centered around the mind. So the mind has to be controlled. That's the point. Bhagavad Gita, we see there, Krishna says that the mind can be one's best friend, or it can be your worst enemy. So in an ideal situation, we should be like Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira, when he made the decision, now everything is to be wound up, all my activities that I had to perform, my duties are all done. Now I'm getting rid of all this false identification of being a king, of being rich and wealthy and powerful. I'm simply going to strip myself of all of those false identities, wrap myself in deerskin, go up in the Himalayas and fix my mind on Krishna. And his relatives, they're also, the Pandavas, even Draupadi, will also go with you. So nobody was trying to persuade him, no, hang on, we still need you. He had taken the course of training a successor before he left, Mahārāja Pariksit. So when Pariksit Maharaj, Prabhupada says, a young fellow. So this is the business of the older guys like us, not you. But the ones of us that have now crossed over that 50-year point. then we need encouragement. Yeah, we don't need you anymore. It doesn't mean that we don't want you, but we've fixed up things so that you can be free to leave home and take up spiritual activities to the highest point, Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada was in Bombay one time in December of 1976, and some gentleman was there, and he was making suggestions about how Krishna consciousness or ISKCON could make progression. So Prabhupada kind of chided him, yes, you're very expert at giving advice, but why don't you do something? He said, this is the problem. That everybody says, no, first of all, I've got to get my daughter married. Right? Everybody in India, they know this is your goal in life, family life, to get your daughter married. And they can't rest until that's done. Once the daughter's been passed off to some lucky guy, or unlucky as it may be, then, all right, now I can do something. So Prabhupada said, I also had that problem. Yeah, he said, I was thinking, before I take up my preaching full time, I should get my daughter married. He had a couple of daughters. He had 3 sons. Get them married and then I'll be free. But somehow or another, he couldn't do it. And the reason why he couldn't do it, he said, was because his wife was thwarting every effort that he made to find a husband for the youngest daughter. Why? Because she wanted that youngest daughter not to be married. Because she can't leave home if she's not married. So keep her unmarried, then she has to stay at home. It's like having a free, home help. Let her be the runaround person. So that Prabhupada got to the point where he was so frustrated, so he told us, he said, all right, to hell with it. And that was Prabhupada talking about his own family life. He wanted to take sannyas and take up his preaching work, and they were trying to stop him. So Prabhupada got to the point, he said, to hell with it. I'm going whether you like it or not. There was one time in Hawaii, Prabhupada was there for the month of May in 1976. So I was giving him his evening massage. And as I was massaging him, he started chuckling, giving a little laugh. He said, you know that story, tea or me? So of course I knew that. Everybody in ISKCON knows that. But I said, no, Srila Prabhupada. Because I was hoping Prabhupada would relate the story to me directly, which he did. So he said, yes. He said, my wife, she sold my Bhagavatams in exchange for some tea biscuits. So I told her, now you have to choose either your husband or your tea. So she thought that I was joking. So she said, all right, then I'll take my tea. So Prabhupada said a few days later, he borrowed 10 rupees from a friend. He left home, and I never came back. That was his conclusion. He never came back. So this is, of course, that's a modern version of Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira. At least Yudhiṣṭhira Maharaj had the compliment of his brother and wife to go with him back to the spiritual realm. So we have to practice. Prabhupada, his circumstances were unusual, of course. He was doing something that nobody had ever done before. But how did he manage to do that? By the strength of his mind. Savaimana Krishna Padara Vindayo. First of all, fix the mind. Then once the mind is fixed, then the senses, sense objects, everything comes under control. And then it just takes some practice. One has to be very careful not to allow the mind to be diverted. Sometimes we take up Krishna consciousness, it sounds very nice, the philosophy is exactly what we want, the practice is there, we do it for some time, but then we allow our minds to wander. Familiarity breeds contempt. So with the wandering mind, the objects of the senses capture. There's the objects of the senses, there's the senses, and then the mind. So all the information that's coming in to the consciousness through the senses, thinking, feeling, etc., tasting, touching, seeing. These are the activities of the knowledge-acquiring senses and the senses of action, hands, legs, tongue, etc. So all of these things have to be controlled. And if they're fixed up properly, then we can make steady progress in spiritual life. But if we don't fix them up, the information that's out there in the form of material energy is always trying to attract the mind back to Maya. That's Maya's business. She's always trying to drag us away from Krishna. Actually, she's not because she wants to, because we want to. Prabhupada said, we're at war with Maya. And he said, actually, not really. We're not at war with Maya exactly, but it's because the demons, they won't surrender. Therefore, Maya has to act in various ways. So we're practicing how to control the mind, and that practice is effective most easily by chanting. In this day and age, Kali Yuga, chanting is the real way to make progress in spiritual life. We don't have to go up to the Himalayas, as the Pandavas did. We simply gather wherever there's the sadhu sangha, the association of devotees. That helps the mind become fixed up. If we're on our own, at any time we can fall a victim. Any slight agitation, and you're gone. What was that name of that Muni that was in the bottom of the river? Sauri Muni. So he was meditating in the bottom of the river. You have to be quite powerful to be able to do that. Enter into the river, sit on the riverbed, and stay there. Not come out for how long, who knows how long. So he was doing that. But unfortunately, there were some fish in the river. They decided to engage in their activities of reproduction. And as soon as he saw them doing that, immediately his mind started to waver, and then he had to break his meditation, come out from the water, and he went off and got married. So he was so powerful that he could live under the water for such a long period, but still the material energy is more powerful, and at any moment we can be distracted. So therefore Prabhupada told us we have to be very careful, and the way to remain fixed in consciousness is to be with others. We are social animals. We can't do without association. Yeah, they did some studies various times about isolation. There's about, at any given time in America, there's about 20,000 criminals who have been put into solitary confinement. So in solitary confinement, you have no sensory stimulation. So the mind is active, but you can't do anything with the body. You can't do anything to realize the desires that are there. Lust, it resides within the body and the mind. So you can't do anything about that if you're in isolation. So gradually what happens is that they all go crazy. There's a story I've told before about one priest. So he was in some third world country, there was some revolution going on, and as a result of that he was captured and put into jail. So they put him into jail for 8 years, all alone. Just gave him his meals, that was it. So this kind of isolation. After 8 years there was a change in government, another revolution. So the new incoming crowd, they let him out. And they saw this man is normal. He was happy, he was jubilant. And they were puzzled. How is it that he's still unaffected by 8 years in solitary confinement? And he told them, he said, I always think of God as my best friend. So whatever happens to me, I always accept that this is intended by God to help me. Yeah, this is something that I can benefit from. So whatever situation I get into, then I accept it immediately. God is always with me. So in that way, he said, I was able to stay sane. But you'll see, just like nowadays, last 2 years, they've been putting people into solitary confinement. Not even solitary confinement, but just confinement. Yeah, what's that? Self-isolation. Yeah, they've been telling people, no, you can't associate in the pubs or the theatres or the sporting events, or you have to stay at home. You have to be locked up by your own family or by your own self. You're not allowed to associate. So in that isolation, people were going crazy. They were having riots in Europe, various countries, because they were not allowed out. So being alone is very difficult, yeah, to be on your own. It's a very difficult situation. And the likelihood, if you try to be alone, is that you'll go a little crazy. You'll become too disturbed. So therefore, in this age, at least in Kali Yuga, we have to situate ourselves properly so that we can come to this point of always remembering Krishna and never forgetting him. So we do that by primarily sadhu sangha. Yeah. If you have a little faith, then the next step is sadhu sangha. You have to strengthen that faith or that belief that you have in Krishna consciousness. You have to strengthen that by sadhu sangha. And then when you come to a certain point of acceptance, then you can fix up that position by bhajana kriya. You take initiation, you agree to follow the rules and regulations and practices, and then very quickly all the anarthas, they all disappear. You become fixed up, your heart becomes clear, and with a clear heart, then you can understand who you are, who is Krishna, what is this material world, what is activity that has to be performed. So this is our goal. Prabhupada set up an international society. Yeah, no intention of ever having us go off up into the Himalayas. We can't do that. I was actually at a yoga school in Dehradun some years back. I did a 1 year. I did a 1 month yoga course. So there, people that were conducting the yoga course, they were attempting to introduce a little bit of philosophy into what they were doing. Because actually, if you go to these karmi organized yoga courses, then it's not yoga. They just do a little exercise. That's all. On your head, you know, on your back, feet up in the air, whatever it may be. But they just teach them, you know, fancy form of physical exercise. So this particular couple that were running the course that I was taking, they were a little bit more interested in, you know, introducing people as well as to do as well as the exercises, to do take up a little philosophical understanding of what they were doing. So one of the first things they said was that don't think that we're yogis. We're not yogis. If you're a yogi, you can go up in the Himalayas, but we're not yogis. Yeah, we're nothing. So don't become puffed up that now I'm doing yoga, you know, now I'm a yogi. We're not yogis. So that was as far as they got. They were supposed to be one of the better yoga teachers because they have a little philosophy. Their philosophy is we're not yogis. That's as far as they're teaching yoga, but we're not yogis. So that kind of nonsense, unfortunately, is become very, widespread. They're very happy of the fact that so many millions of people around the world have taken up yoga. Yeah, they have an international yoga day. And Prime Minister Modi, he does his little exercise, and so like that. This is their idea, but that's not yoga. Real yoga means to unify. It means to identify with the truth. That's the whole aim of it. Not to think that, oh, go on thinking that I am this body, I am this mind. We're not. We're the soul that's above those things, but we need to uncover that understanding and then act upon it. So the Pandavas, at least, they know what is yoga. They know what is unification of the self with the Supreme Self. And then they go and they can practice, or not practice exactly, but they go into the Himalayas and they stay there until the time comes when they can leave their bodies. So that we want, but we can't in Kali Yuga do it in this, according to this description. Very difficult. We need association. We can't do without it. And if we have the proper association, whether we're socially isolating or not, if you have some companions who are interested in the same thing, liberation, getting free from the material entanglement, then you can make progress. We can see, share the experiences and understandings that we have as we're doing, that's Sangha. And in that way, very quickly, one can make rapid advancement, so that when you come to this point, death is near. I was just speaking yesterday with Dharmatma Prabhu. So he was telling me about somebody he knew. He said there's a phenomenon where you all of a sudden feel a sense of overwhelming dread, apprehension, and it's so powerful that you can't think, you don't know what to do. You just become filled with dread. He said, and then this person, friend that he was telling me about, he said, and then he died. He said, I nearly died. He has so many stents in his chest to keep his blood vessels open. He said, but I also had that sense of dread. It just comes over you, overwhelms you, and now I'm going to die. So we want to avoid being in a dreadful situation. No dread. We want to be joyous. We want to be satisfied that what we've done in life will lead us to a higher goal in our next, and hopefully back home, back to Godhead. That's the whole point. So by practice with others, by association with sadhus, then gradually these lower stages of understanding are stripped away, just like the telescope. It's they're extended and then retracted. So in the same way, in this material world, Prabhupada says that the material energy is extended for some time and then it's retracted. There's very elaborate descriptions in the 5th canto about that retraction. So what's the point of the retraction? To get freed from the sense of identifying with material nature as being the self, or part of the self. We're not these bodies, we're not these minds, but we're actually spirit souls. And as spirit souls, we're part and parcels of the Supreme Spirit Soul, Krishna. Krishna is Bhaktaram Jagnatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, Maheshwaram. He's the all-powerful, and this material world is under his dominion. He owns it, he enjoys it, and it's our business to apply ourselves in Krishna's service so that his enjoyment of his energies can be enhanced more and more. That's the business of Radharani. In the spiritual world, the business of the gopis, the gopas, all the different inhabitants, it's all for one thing, to give enjoyment or happiness to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When Krishna's happy, then we're happy. If Krishna's not happy, we're not happy. This is the position. Our lives are tied in fully, or should be tied in fully, with the goal of making the Supreme Lord, or not making him, but allowing him to enjoy with us, or allowing us to enjoy with him. That's life, that's spiritual life. So the Pandavas, they're not going into some existential void. When they left home and left everything in the hands of King Pariksit, they weren't going there to go and sit in a mountain cave and chant, "We're not yogis." Let the Mayavadis do that. Our business is to chant the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and become joyful And when we're joyful, Krishna's joyful, and we can all be joyful together, that's the perfect situation. Yeah, not that we have to hang around in this material world forever and ever. I mean, some people do, but the Krishna conscious person, this is the mentality that we must cultivate, that nothing can detract us from the lotus feet of Krishna. Whatever we do, whatever we speak, say, do, etc., is all done for the pleasure of the Lord, not for our own pleasure. As soon as we start meditating on things, oh, there's a nice, good-looking woman. Oh, there's a handsome man. Oh, here's one, you know, sometimes you get these old men, 80, 90 years old, and they marry some girl, 25 years old. So one thing, we think, why would a young girl like that marry such an old bag of bone and skin? And the reason is because, oh, this guy's got a lot of money. He's got a lot of wealth. So if I marry him, automatically, even if I divorce him afterwards, I'll get half of his wealth and live very nicely. Sometimes tens of millions of dollars in the divorce courts, pass from one partner to another. So whatever opulences that we see, whatever forces that act upon us to bring out that lust which is within the heart, we have to rise above that. If we allow ourselves to be distracted, if we allow ourselves that any stimulus of the senses and the mind, it's very dangerous. So we have to be very, very cautious. And that's why it's good to be in a society, international society for Krishna consciousness. No isolation, but rather we want to integrate and work together for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, and automatically we get satisfaction from Krishna being satisfied. Sometimes devotees will ask Prabhupada, how do I know if my activities or my service is making Krishna happy? So Prabhupada would say, if your spiritual master is happy, then you can be happy. Then Krishna's happy. So this is our business. We want to be happy. Ananda, that's the ultimate gain. Sat Chit Ananda. Sat means you're eternal, but that's not going to bring you any bliss in the sense that there's no interaction. So Sat, but then Chit, you come to a knowledge or a platform of real knowledge, real realization. When you come to that platform, then Ananda, then you can be happy. So Prabhupada he said, I want that all the people of the world should become happy. I don't know whether I read it or I saw a video clip, but Prabhupada made that statement. I want that all the people of the world should be happy. So how to make everybody happy? Give them Krishna consciousness. Nothing else is going to do it. Being the president or the prime minister of some, millions of karmis, sense enjoyers, it's not going to make you happy. Yeah. All that happens to people with no knowledge is that they fight. They challenge each other. You got something that I want, he's got something that you want, and they go to war, as we're seeing. But these things, these war situations, that's the permanent situation of anybody in the material world. It's not that, just now and again there's a war, otherwise everything is okay. It's not okay. Nothing is okay. Nothing is ever going to be okay until we get out of the material world. And in the meantime, foolish people are scrambling after resources. If I have this resource or that resource, that makes me more powerful, then I can put down my enemies, put down my neighbors, take them over. I can become a big man. So how big will you become? How long will it last? You can be a Napoleon. Yeah, Napoleon, when he took over the whole of Europe, he took over far more territory than what we're seeing the Russians are trying to do now. There was an ambition there. He wanted the whole of the world. He took all of Europe. Then he thought, oh, now the next best place is India. Because in those days everybody knew that India is the wealthiest country in the world. That's a fact. So he had his eyes on it, Napoleon. He wanted to somehow or another take over, everything and anyone and everything. So over a period of about 25 years maximum, he was fighting. He fought 62 wars. You think this is one war. He fought 62 wars and won all of them except, of course, the last one. Then when he got defeated in the last battle at Waterloo, then everything that he'd worked for, there were 2 million young men that gave their lives on either side in the wars that he created. So after being captured, all of that was gone, evaporated. He ended up, they put him in exile, another self-isolation, some rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, St. Helena, I think it was called. And after 6 years, he died there as a pauper. So what was the advantage? You wanted to be a big man. You wanted to fight so many people and declare yourself, I'm the boss. There's an old saying, France is Napoleon, Napoleon is France. So Prabhupada, when he was in Paris, there was a statue of Napoleon and there was some words written underneath. So Prabhupada asked the devotees, what does it say? So he said, France is Napoleon, Napoleon is France. So Prabhupada said, so here is France, where is Napoleon? So this is our illusion that we can enjoy in this material world. The more opulences that we try to gather for ourselves, the more anxious we become in trying to keep it. Getting it, acquiring it is one thing, but hanging on to it's a whole different realm. So always fighting. Everybody's in this situation where they're trying to be number one. What Prabhupada used to call the mastership. Yeah, everybody wants mastership of everything else. So that's an illusion. So we have to give up these illusions. See what we really are. Meditate on what we are as living beings, why we're here, what is this world, and where are we going. So these are the questions of anybody with a little intelligence. Yeah, we want to know, where did we come from? Where are we going? Will this action that I'm performing make me happy or not? And by happiness, we mean real happiness. Yeah, eternality, happiness in eternality. One of the first Back to Godheads I ever read, number 37. It was the first one I read. There was an article in that by my godbrother Upendra Prabhu, where he was saying that real happiness must be eternal. And then he gave a very nice explanation of how, we're how we're actually not these bodies with spirit souls, and that if we want to be really happy, then we have to get derive our happiness from the spiritual platform, which is eternal. If we don't, then no matter what you accumulate in this material world, it will never make you happy. Real happiness must be eternal. It must be of a nature that can never be taken away from us. So we are actually by nature always happy. Sat Chit Ananda, this is our situation. And when we link up with Krishna, he's happy, he's always happy, yeah, and we'll become happy too. Okay, so we'll finish at this point. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Yes, Mataji. Can I get some water?
Thank you very much for the nice lecture. When I arrived, you were saying something about the first words I caught from you were like whether one person goes voluntarily or is kicked out of this body, and then you were talking about death, right? And what made me think is like it seems like in every age there is that one is not necessarily forced to live against his will. And we have the freedom to take our own life if we want to.
No.
And although it's not recommended, but we have that freedom.
No,
like people do it.
If you think like that, then you're not understanding. Nobody can do anything, including taking your own life. It's not possible.
Well, I'm saying
I'll
people
tell you a little story. Sorry, I might be off point here, but
okay.
Whilst it's still in my head, I better tell it. There was an old couple in England. So they got to the point where they were so invalid they couldn't do anything practically. So they became so fed up with their material existence, they decided on a double suicide. Yeah, I kill you and you kill me. So the old man, he had a gun, a revolver that he'd saved from the First World War, which was about 60 years before. So he said, I'll shoot you and then I'll shoot myself. Double suicide. So he took the gun out. His wife sat down. Bang! He shot her, hit her in the forehead. Then he turned the gun on him. She fell over. He took the gun, put it in his mouth. Bang! He fell over. Then they were found after some minutes or hours, and the gun was actually so old that the gunpowder didn't work anymore. So when he shot the gun, it hit the woman his wife in the forehead, but it bounced off. She just got knocked out. And then when he turned the gun on himself, he fired it, and the bullet just kind of came out of the barrel of the gun and stopped on his tongue, so he had it in his mouth. So even if you want to commit suicide, yeah, that's only if it's allowed. You have no authority to decide whether you're going to live or die. That's the way things are. There's lots of stories like that. Sorry, anyway, go on.
Well, what I was thinking, like in other ages, the yogis will have a method to willingly leave their body if they wanted to, if they were advanced enough to take to the practice, and they would voluntarily do it. Or sometimes it seems like it was even given as a boon that you can leave your body voluntarily, like for example Bhishma, I don't know, other. So it seems like that the free will of the individual was such in each age that there was a way that if you didn't want to tolerate the miseries of this life, or for other reasons, philosophical, other reasons, a method appropriate to the abilities of that age was also there. Now in Kali Yuga, we see that people still do it, but they just do it like tamaguna methods, suffering, bad for other people, bad for you, without a proper way. So it seems like the right of the individual is respected in all the ages, that nothing is forced upon you so much. But then there is, in Kali Yuga, there's not a real process like it was in other ages, like proportionate to the abilities of Kali Yuga. So my question is, although the devotees think that this life is very precious, so every day is important, and they would not reason like that, they would not want to shorten their lives in any way, because they need every day to get purified. Their mentality is like, I'm not purified enough, I need more time to purify, because if it were to end now, I would not go back to the spiritual world. Like there is the humbleness that comes from, I'm not good enough.
What's your question?
So the question is, this humbleness was also present in anybody who was performing things in the previous ages, although some people decided to leave the body voluntarily. So is it anything in Kali Yuga that can be done? I mean, is there a proportionate method to live voluntarily that will not cause a bad, if the reason behind was different from just plain despair, would that be approved like it was in other ages, like voluntarily leaving the body in meditation, that kind?
All right.
Thank you.
In other ages, when we hear about people voluntarily quitting the body, they're going to a higher destination, the yogis and so forth. They quit their bodies not out of frustration, not out of ignorance, but actually with full knowledge that there's higher levels of consciousness and living in the universe, and that they're taking one step at a time, or they may take more. But they have, by yogic practice, they realize that they're not the body. There's no sense of dread. There's no sense of agitation, but rather they're very clear in consciousness, very joyful, and they know where they're going to go next. They aim for other planets like Janaloka, Mahaloka, Tapaloka. These are where the great saints and sages live, where the messiahs come from. So they're living in the higher realms of the universe. So you can get there. You can, if you practice, you can leave this body, as they do. There's self-immolation. Sometimes the yogis, they will sit down, they raise the consciousness to this Brahma Rundra, and then the body itself immolates. It burns to ashes. They're freed from that and they go to the higher platform. So that's a lot different from suicide. That's not suicide. Yeah, even, the example there is Sati. She followed her husband, by entering into the flames, the sacrificial fire. So that's not forbidden, that's glorious. But in this age, Prabhupada said that when the British came, they saw so many widows when the husbands had died, then in the name of following the Vedic practices, they would take the widow and put her on the pyre of the husband, even if they didn't want to. So that's practically, they would, they left their bodies kicking and screaming, not being elevated, but actually they're going to a hellish condition. So suicide, or leaving the body, if you voluntarily do it because you're advanced in consciousness and you're advanced in controlling the senses and the mind, that's fine. We encourage that if you can do it. But to to do it by force, or to commit suicide because of depression, because I feel that my life is so miserable that I don't want to live it anymore. So that's the mentality of somebody who commits suicide. They don't want to live anymore, and so they try to obliterate themselves, and they think that if I kill myself, all my suffering will be finished. But it's not a fact. If you kill yourself unauthorized, your suffering is just about to begin. That's actually the position. So we don't advise people to commit suicide. We advise people, well, you can do. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he used to say that when you take sannyas, that's civil suicide. Yeah, that's the name, civil suicide. You take sannyas as Prabhupada did. So as far as the family are concerned, once the father or the leader of the household, once he takes sannyas, then he's as good as dead. There's no interaction anymore. So that kind of, civil suicide is okay, as long as you take up Krishna consciousness. Is that all right? Yeah. So we shouldn't mix the two and make a mistake. There's one kind of quitting of the body will elevate us. Another kind of attempting to quit the body, that will drive us down further and further into ignorance and more suffering. All right. Any other questions? Use the...
My question. It's a lot of information. I will try to make it short. Guru Maharaj, where I live, there the government has obliged everyone by a serious accident or burning or whatever, but the person is not dead yet.
What? I can't tell what you're saying. It's on, I think. It was on. It's just you have to speak clearly and slowly, so I can...
There is one, very recently, one law is made in my country that everybody who is almost dead, is gonna die is automatically a donor. So the problem is, and
Ultimately, a goner.
what?
You said that they're ultimately.
Automatically you are a donor. You will be cut, your body will be cut while the brain is warm and the heart is still beating. They cut you open. They take all the organs. They will say only for the heart transplantation or kidney, but actually they empty you all, and maybe they put a lot of stones in it. And you are obliged, unless you sign something and wear it with you, that I don't want my body to be used for other persons who love, especially rich people maybe, who like to live longer, though God had mentioned that reason, on that condition, and that day you will die. They don't accept it. So government has obliged everyone to be, you are automatically a donor. If something happened to you, they will cut you open by ambulance.
What's your question, Madam?
My question is, what is actually death, and is this criminal? Is this murder? Because the heart is still beating and the brain is still warm, meaning there is some blood circulation. And who is responsible for killing me? Suppose something happened to me.
Ultimately, you have to be responsible for yourself. Whatever situation you get into is a result of your own desires. Yeah? If you get free from all material desire, then there's no question of interference or being afraid of, some government or medical facility. Even if they come and take your organs, who cares? You're going to lose them anyway. So our point is that if you take up Krishna consciousness, that's civil suicide. Effectively what we're doing is that we're taking up a process which will free us from the false designations that I am this body, this is my wife or husband, these are my children, this is my wealth, etc., etc. When we give up that mentality, that's like suicide. Yeah, civil suicide. You take sannyas. Whether you're a man or a woman, take sannyas. Means give up your attachments to all material activities and all material facilities. Concentrate on the lotus feet of Krishna. He'll take you out of this mṛtyau loka, this place of birth and death. That's all right. We can discuss this afterwards. Any other question? Yes, sir.
Devotees.
Well, that's interesting. Many years ago, when I was living in Australia, I think it was probably about 1979 or 1980, I got a phone call from some gentleman that he had been reading this book by Kubler-Ross about these different stages of, consciousness. And he asked me, he said, what happens, I've approached different groups to, find out what they're thinking of or what they teach their followers. So he said, I'd like to know, what do you do in the Hare Krishna movement when somebody's in that terminally ill situation? So I said, I have no idea. I said, we don't have any old people in our society, so I can't tell you what they, what they go through. I've never studied it. And at that time, the oldest of us were about 30 years old. So I couldn't answer his question. That was what you were asking. Maybe now somebody could do some survey. I mean, with the hope that you're getting the person who's participating to understand, don't worry, you're not this body. Then it won't apply to them. But if we keep on thinking we are this body, yeah, you'll go through those stages, no doubt. But if you remember, I'm Krishna's eternal servant, then who cares what the body does or doesn't do? Yeah. Okay, we're going to finish there. It's 9 o'clock, I think. Sorry, 9:10. So thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.